Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Gather and Go, the podcast that helps you plan, promote, and lead better trips. I'm Brian Jewell. I am your host, and I am thrilled to be coming to you today with a very special episode of the podcast. Today, we're going to bring you some audio from our friends at Virginia Tourism. This is an excerpt of an upcoming podcast series that Virginia has put together in cooperation with the United States Civil Rights Trail. And this is going to be a trio of episodes that tell the stories of the people and places and events throughout Virginia that made a real difference during the civil rights movement of the last century. Now, this 3-episode series is going to be launching on the U.S. Civil Rights Trail podcast feed in early 2026. But the Virginia Tourism folks have been kind enough to give us early access to one of the episodes. I'm really excited to share that with you today. This series is going to explore sites that you can actually visit with your groups in places like Farmville and Fredericksburg, Danville and Richmond, throughout the state of Virginia to learn about how Virginians helped to change the course of American history. Now, I'm going to share a short excerpt from the first episode. I want to tell you now that you can go ahead and subscribe to the U.S. Civil Rights Trail podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so that when the full series is available, you get it right away. This excerpt is from an episode titled Students Take a Stand in Farmville, Virginia.
On April 23, 1951, a 16-year-old student at Robert Russa Moton High School was past patiently waiting for a better school. Originally built for 180 students, twice that number crammed into the main building and additional buildings made of plywood and tar paper. There was no plumbing, no cafeteria, no gymnasium, and rooms were heated by wooden stoves. Life at Moton High was vastly different from Farmville High School, where white students worked in science labs and enjoyed athletic fields. Student Barbara Johns was tired of the school board's broken promises of a new building. So she devised a plan to force change. What she did that day in 1951 was not only extraordinary for a girl that age, but also an ironic twist in the legacy of the man the school was named after, Robert Russa Moton. Just a few decades before Barbara Johns took a stand, Robert Moton was one of the most influential Black men in America. Raised in Virginia, Moton became an educator and soon a leader in Black education circles. This led to his close friendship with Booker T. Washington, founder of the Tuskegee Institute and the first Black man to dine at the White House. Moton was passionate about elevating Black people through education, so much so that he succeeded Washington as the second president of the Tuskegee Institute. Moton was equally passionate about not making any trouble with whites. This approach fueled his ascension in Washington, D.C., where he assisted President Woodrow Wilson in an investigation into the conditions for Black soldiers during World War I. He watered down the discrimination he saw in his report to President Wilson and urged Black soldiers to refrain from pushing back against racist behavior. He believed Black people could prove their worth through education and excellence, not by challenging the white power structure. This approach made him appealing to white society and gave him access to some of the most powerful men in America, which in turn helped him fund Tuskegee and other Black institutions of education. So imagine what Robert Moton would have thought when 11 years after his death, Barbara Johns stood in front of the Moton High School student body and announced a strike for better conditions. Her courage and passion went against Moton's reluctance for agitation and helped get the ball rolling for what would become Brown v. Board of Education, the landmark case ending segregation in schools. Joan Johns Cobbs is Barbara Johns' sister.
Well, my sister said it was divine intervention. And I believe it because I don't understand. At their age,
Absolutely,
they could have come up with a plan to try to carry out something that they knew could be potentially dangerous.
For centuries, tobacco shaped the state of Virginia. It dominated the economy in the 17th and 18th centuries. And even in the mid-20th century, tobacco was the economic driver in places like the small town of Farmville. Tobacco farms surrounded the downtown, where farmers brought in their tobacco leaves to be stored, processed, and sold inside the multi-storied red brick warehouses. Farmville also offered two segregated colleges, the all-women's Longwood College and the men's liberal arts Hampden-Sydney College. And in 1951, the town also had a sizable and skilled Black community.
And so in Farmville in Prince Edward County, there were two sections that had a lot of Black farmers. You also had people who were tradesmen, and then there were two, maybe three generations of Black physicians and a cadre of Black trained nurses, college-trained nurses. And so that was unique.
Skip Griffin's father was Reverend Francis Griffin, pastor of the First Baptist Church.
So these were the kind of people that were around. There were a lot of people who had gone to historically Black colleges, and then they had programs at Ohio State and Columbia Teachers College, and there were a lot of Black teachers who had master's degrees, which was very unusual. So Farmville, it wasn't a hotbed of activism. It was really people believed that they could build themselves up via strong churches, strong education, and strong businesses.
Backing up a few years to 1939, a new school, Robert Russa Moton High School, opened up on the corner of South Main Street and Griffin Boulevard. The simple red brick, red-roofed, one-story building offered 8 classrooms and an auditorium for the Black children of Prince Edward County. It filled up immediately.
So by the mid-1940s, population expanded, doubled, and tripled. So at peak occupancy, this building had about 477 students in it when it was built for only that 180 number.
Today, the school is a museum. Its executive director, Kanan Townsend, describes what it was like back in 1951.
Hectic, overcrowded. You had 2 to 3 classes happening in the auditorium concurrently, classes outside, classes in their school buses, really wherever and however they could find that space because they just didn't have a ton of it. No lockers, no gymnasium, no cafeteria, no kitchen, no teacher restrooms. And then every book, every desk, every piece of football equipment, every school bus were hand-me-down used from the segregated white facilities in this community.
Eventually, temporary buildings were added, made of tar paper with no heat and no bathrooms. While these chicken shacks, as the students call them, were built to alleviate overcrowding, they also stood as a reminder of the racial inequality in Farmville. One student who took note was 16-year-old Barbara Johns. Barbara's younger sister, Joan Johns Cobbs, attended Moton with her sister and was interviewed as part of a National Park Service oral history project.
My sister was a very, independent, forceful, determined type of person.
She had the heart and the mind of a debater. And so she had this ability to analyze rhetoric, right? And so she understood, all men are created equal, didn't say some, right? And it didn't end in a question mark. This was something that was supposed to be for everybody. So why don't we hold the state, the country accountable to the values that it already claims to hold up to?
Johns was the oldest of 5 children and the niece of Reverend Vernon Johns, a pioneer in the civil rights movement. Her uncle influenced how she saw the world around her. Her siblings were very much her responsibility. On school days, she was in charge of getting them dressed, packing their lunches, and sending them off to school. One day, in the bustle of the morning, she forgot to get her own lunch.
She goes back into the house to grab her lunch, and the bus has left her. And so she did what any 15, 16-year-old at the time would have done, and she throws out her thumb and she starts hitchhiking, right? Of course, not recommended today, but different time back then. Nobody drives by for a while. Eventually, the Farmville High School bus drives by, which was one of the segregated white schools. They were half empty, and Farmville High School bus had to pass by Moton High School on the way to get to Farmville High School. And she asks for a ride, and they say no, and they leave her there, and they drive off. So that was one of the things that, to speculatively, I will say, probably made her think, literally same tax dollars, same school system, and they had to pass by Moton on their way. Why couldn't they have given me a ride?
Johns couldn't shake her frustration over the Prince Edward County School Board's refusal to build a new school for Black students. So she hatched a plan for a student strike. First, she talked the most popular kids in school into joining her strike committee. This, she thought, would help sway the rest of the students.
My sister really, I think, was the one who got everyone together to talk about it, and she swore them to secrecy. And the fact that they didn't tell anyone, and they knew probably that there would be some ripple effects on family and everyone else, but I think they decided that they had to do it.
Then they pieced together their plan.
They selected April to be the timeline of the strike because being in late April would mess up finals. And if they could mess up finals, they could mess up graduation, which would kind of maximize the attention they would get on this, and people would know that they were serious.
But first, they had to distract the principal.
I think there was only one person that might have had the authority to block her, would be the principal, because he was a very strong, stern disciplinarian, and he might have had the ability to block her or some of the students.
Taking a pause here to say that if you're interested in visiting civil rights sites and museums through places like Farmville, Danville, Fredericksburg, Richmond, and anywhere else in the state, go to virginia.org or civilrightstrail.com. You can also check the show notes for links to these websites and other resources. It's a great way to begin planning your trip.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this little teaser of the fascinating story of what took place in Farmville, Virginia during the civil rights movement. Of course, there is going to be much more to this episode, and to make sure you hear it all, you should go ahead and subscribe to the U.S. Civil Rights Trail podcast on your favorite podcast player. And of course, you can learn more about the entire Civil Rights Trail at civilrightstrail.com, and lots more information about traveling in Virginia and touring some of its many, many historic sites at virginia.org. Now, we'll be back with you next week with a regularly scheduled episode of Gather and Go. Until then, though, remember this. At the end of the day, we're all on this trip together, so let's make it a good one. See you next time.